because we are a little bit too modest, if I can say that, Ambassador, and you might have already discovered that. We Belgians and also in Brussels, we're a little bit too modest with the things that we are doing. And I think that, for instance, on everything what is passive building, Brussels is one of these Europe's regions that we are really top notch. We are really on the head of it. And we have so many buildings that respond to all these passive norms. And now the same thing is happening with all the circle construction, where when we demolish a building and we try to avoid demolishing a building, but sometimes it's simply necessary because the structure is bad or you cannot change it into an office building into a housing building. Some reasons it happens. What we do then is that we recuperate all the material that's in there. So it's not just demolishing and put it on somewhere in a place. No, it's reused in other buildings, maybe in the same building or at least in other buildings, and that's what we are doing also for a couple of years now. So we really believe in this circular construction, passive building, and we have experiences to share, as you will hear later. Brussels, as you know, is the capital of Europe. We are a city of 1.2 million inhabitants, 162 square kilometers, which means that we are a medium-sized city that's international and provincial at the same time. We are confronted with commuters issues where people come by car for walking, working in the city. It's diminishing a bit through the COVID, the teleworking and things like that. But on the other hand, we want to remain an open city. We are a city without a dominant culture, which means that we are a very interested place for artists to come, because people can be what they are. And there's no dominant culture, so no dominant language, although French is the lingua franca, but people can express very often in their own languages. And that's the reason more that we should work together with Scandinavian countries, and particularly with Denmark, because you have another tradition, you have a good tradition of well-being. And maybe you are aware, but in Brussels, we are now rewriting our code of construction in general, of building. We called it a good living instrument. I made, as a mobility minister, the last 10 years, a paradigm change in Brussels for less cars, more place to people. The Jan Gehl philosophy, you know it very well, of course. He came to my office, by the way, twice. So when he came to my office, he saw everything what a city shouldn't do. So that was that's all from the past. So anyway, we did the good move instrument, and now we're going to do the good living to make it a real legal instrument that obliges the way that we make public space, the way that we build buildings, and the interaction between it is very essential in the city. So I'm very happy that between the Kingdom of Denmark and the Kingdom of Belgium, in particular the both cities, Copenhagen and Brussels, that we have this exchange where people can know each other, and let this be the beginning of a further enhancement of our collaboration. We're really looking forward to. And there's one thing I want to say more, Ambassador. Someday, I hope that we will take the capital of cycling away from Copenhagen. And someday it will happen. We are surely the capital of the cars, but we are getting rid of it. And someday we should beat you on that. But that will take some time, I guess. So thank you for this exchange.
Thank you so much. Could I also just, on behalf of the embassy, say warmly welcome to all of you to this online seminar. We have really been looking forward to get inspiration both from Brussels and Denmark on how circularity can be in our buildings and in our urban spaces, can make our cities, of course, more livable, but it's also an issue about economy and, of course, an issue about sustainability 1 month ahead of the climate summit also in Glasgow. For us as an embassy, it's a privilege to work together with you, Pascal, and your people, and thank you very much for your support and your active participation. I would say to create new connections, to learn from each other, and if possible, to pave the way for very specific and concrete collaboration between Belgium and Denmark is very much one of the reasons behind our existence as an embassy. And just to mention a few examples on when it comes to green transition and climate, we are already doing a lot together. This year, despite COVID, did we, for instance, in January, see our 2 ministers for energy, Tine van Straten and Dan Jørgensen, signing an agreement on cooperation on the energy islands in the North Sea, and funds are now set aside also for this cooperation. And And later on in spring, did we have also together with your region, Pascal, but with the regions of Belgium, did we have also online seminars on energy renovation, and not least, because that's important for us in Denmark, but also for you, how to attract private funding for energy renovations. And now we have specific cooperation taking place between municipalities in Denmark and in Belgium, following up on this seminar. And then just last week, I had the pleasure of biking around in Leuven with the region of Flanders and Leuven and the municipality. And we did in the evening have a seminar with 200, almost 200 architects and people with an interest in urban design to look into how can we incorporate the bicycling culture better into our urban planning. So very much to follow up on. And then here today we are discussing circular economy, also an area where we ought to do much more together. There's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel. It's too expensive and it's too time consuming, we believe. And then the issue is, of course, circularity and how to find a sustainable green transition. And exactly our homes, our offices, and our public space is essential. We've looked into the figures, and when you look across Europe, buildings are responsible for half of all extracted material, half of all energy consumption, 1/3 of all water consumption, and 1/3 of all waste that is generated. So therefore, we have to look into this. But as you will probably all of you hear in the presentations today, a lot is already taking place. So we hope today to give some answers to the challenges when it comes to circularity and the building sector. You will have a presentation of some of the policies that are conducted in Brussels and in Denmark, but we were also eager to present to you some concrete projects and to look into, can we scale up these projects in Belgium and in Denmark, in Brussels, and in the capital region of Copenhagen. And then just, yes, to all of you, if you have questions, comments during the presentations, please use the chat, and we'll make sure that they are posted to the panelists during either the interventions or in our panel discussion in the end. Just to say, we look forward to our exchange today. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you.
Thank you, State Secretary and Danish Ambassador, for this introduction. I suppose we are happy to have you for a couple of minutes. I suppose maybe your agendas won't allow to stay with us, but we can share questions and remarks with you. So we will start our presentations first with the regional and national policies. Then we go to a more city and local perspective, and we'll end with some inspiring practices in Denmark and Brussels. So for the first presentation about the regional policy in Brussels, I will give the floor to Anne Paduard from Brussels Environment, Project Manager of Circular Economy. Anne, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction. I was invited to present you today in a short way, we only have 10 minutes, the action plan for circular economy that was established for the Brussels capital region for the construction sector. And the idea is just to present you shortly like how this action plan came up and what are the initiatives and the actions that we're currently already supporting. And of course, there's still a lot of work to do, but I'll present you just shortly a bit of a state of the art where we come from and where we're going to. And so the context of Brussels in this EU that is making a transition towards circular cities, I thought it was just important, but we already heard some of the numbers just before, to just share with you why we are actually doing this in the EU context. Why are buildings so important when we look at this topic? Well, we see that the building sector is actually a primary consumer of the energy in Europe. We see that 40% is related to all our construction activities, but also the emissions of the greenhouse gases. When we look at the construction sector, it's about 40% that is due to the way we construct, the way we choose materials, etc. And it's important to also look at those numbers a bit more in detail, because there's 2 points on which we can actually take some measures, take some actions. So of course we see the energy parts, that 25 to 30% of the impact of the greenhouse emissions, of the greenhouse gases, is actually related to how do we live today, how do we occupy buildings, how do we heat and we cool them, the technical equipment. And for sure that's something that we've been working on in Belgium, in Europe, that we're trying to tackle. But what we're not tackling yet nowadays is the remaining 10-15% that relate actually to the embodied emissions that of the materials that we build with. So the materials, I mean the selection of materials and looking at what's the embodied CO2 impact related to materials, but it's also how do we assemble our materials in these buildings and how do we keep them as long as possible in a loop. That's something that we should work on, and that's really like the focus of circular economy, to try to reduce the way we put materials and we deal with the waste that is coming from our construction activities, how we deal with them. That's really, I think, the topic of today. Besides, we already mentioned as well that when we look at the raw materials extraction, 50% is due to the construction, and also in waste terms, 40% of the waste that is generated everywhere comes from demolition activities, but also from construction and renovation activities. So this is really an important attention point in Brussels and in Europe all over. The numbers that I showed just before come from the EU context, but when we look at Brussels, of course, the focus points are slightly different. But what's important for us is that we are conscious of the fact that the way we look at the construction industry today, it's too much on just extracting, producing, using, and then disposing. We need to take action today, or actually already yesterday. And especially when we want to push the renovation rates today up, we will see that the waste we're generating today will also increase if we want to renovate with a rate of 3% compared to the 1% that we're seeing today. We will also see that we need to work more efficient with the resources that we already have in Brussels and the waste that we don't want to generate in the long term. So that's why already for several years, Brussels is really taking a mind shift, is seeing how it can evolve from this linear model where we come and bring resources in our region and we dispose them outside of Brussels. We want to get away from that linear model. And we have ambitions towards 3040 to really come and settle in this circular model in Brussels that keeps the resources as long as possible in our region. And so that means that there are several strategies that we really have to focus on. First of all, in Brussels, we really already have a large building stock, and we want to see how can we maintain what's already there, the buildings that exist, and stop demolishing them if there's not good or proper reasons for them. So how can we give a longer life to our buildings, but also how can we provide new circular plans to building that make it possible to transform buildings more easily from one function to the other. And so we don't need to think of this demolition because our buildings are much more circular, but also in way of designing circular building systems that are adaptable, that are demountable and reusable, and reuse as much as possible the streams that we already have here in Brussels instead of bringing them out. So in the context of the Brussels Capital Region Circular Economy Strategy, that in Brussels we call the PREC, there was this 10 years framework that was developed in 2016 to move the economy of Brussels towards a more circular model. And so the attention points, of course, were to develop economic opportunities, but that were linked to these environmental objectives, and also to see if we could relocate really the economy to Brussels and create jobs. And this was the context in which we established... someone should see if he can put the micro off. But so this was the context in which we developed the Circular Economy Action Plan for the building sector in 2018, together with the industry, together with the actors on the field. So it was really them stating that we want to move towards this circular built environment, and that gave us also the ideas and the feedback we needed. And so together with them, we worked actually towards three strategic stages in the future, like to see how could we evolve to a circular Brussels. And so in 2025, we agreed we should work on a voluntary framework in which all buildings voluntarily apply as much as possible circular principles. The industry is starting to evolve towards having a high enough offer and demand. And towards 2030 and 2040, we want to come with a regulation that is obligatory, of course, in the first stage for the public buildings that should give the good example, and on the long term, 2040 for all buildings. So these are ambitions that we stated together with the sector that thinks we can actually achieve this. And so the action plan was actually centered along four main focuses. First, really supporting the stakeholders on the territory, but really stimulating and accompanying the demand and the offer. Second focus is really on reuse, something that we really want to prioritize in Brussels, keeping our resources on the territory, but we also have to prepare a framework for the logistics and the regulation. So this is the general focus points, which we established in a larger action plan, which you can find online. Unfortunately, for now, it's only in French and in Flemish. But I'm not gonna go over all the actions, but this is actually there's an overview of about 140 actions that translates itself in numerous projects in Brussels, from which a lot have already started, already taking place, but there's still room for improvement and for future development of the actions. And my idea was today of showing you some of the actions that we've been putting in place and some of the really practical results to show where we are today, and of course to show that there's still a lot of work that will be ongoing. So one of the main the starting point for us, it's really also learning by doing. We cannot set just a theoretical framework and wait until we know everything. It's also by pushing the industry and all the actors to really test out circular principles in their practice. And so a nice initiative that really is responsible for really small and larger projects to throw themselves in the circularity has been the Be Circular call. So actually everyone can introduce a demand. There's of course like criteria in terms of circularity, but of course the idea is that we promote is upscalable concepts and is upscalable businesses and learn in these projects of what are the difficulties and where are we already today. And I just want to show you from that call one really interesting example in Laken in Brussels, the Van der Groten Valens site, which was actually an old moving company. You can see the image down. That needed to be demolished today because of some the context was not that it couldn't remain a building today, so the idea that it had to be demolished, but the project proposed to recuperate all the bricks and to actually go and insert it in the new conception. And so 90% of the old bricks could be recuperated, needed to be valorized and cleaned, of course, on site. But 90%, which is about, I think it was like 80,000 bricks, could be recuperated in a new building. And I think what is most important that, okay, we managed to see how it works, the difficulties, but the enterprise that was involved is actually also reusing it for new projects. So that's what I mean with upscalable. It also has to sensibilize the actors, like, okay, this is not a one shot, this is something that I can integrate in my daily business model. Another example that we saw in Brussels in the context of a EU H2020 project called Buildings as Material Banks. I hope some of you or all of you have already heard. Was a bit more in the more experimental phase. and it actually concerned the renovation of 300 to 400 student modules on a campus in Brussels of the VUB. So all the student modules needed to be renovated. And the idea of this pilot project was to say, okay, we don't want to focus like one fixed function for these modules, but we actually want to integrate a circular approach, which means that, well, today it will maybe be an office after renovation, but we anticipate that maybe after 5 or 10 years, we will need more or different functions on the site. And so the plan that we implement today needs to be able to make these transformations possible without having to make a lot of interventions. But that also means, of course, that we needed to be innovative in terms of building systems. So building systems that are demountable, adaptable, and reusable. So in those terms, this pilot project really gave us a lot of new insights that are upscalable for other types of construction in Brussels. So we can even see that for renovation, it's also possible. Clearly, it's more difficult, but every challenge can be faced, I guess. Another set of actions that I shortly want to provide to or present to you, it's also the need for tools and guidelines for all of the actors, because we still need to sensibilize and we need to guide all the actors on what is circular economy, what does it mean in the building sector, and how can you apply it, and eventually go and evaluate it. So one of the references of Brussels Environment, it's the Guide of Sustainable Construction, which takes topics that are wider than just circular economy, but it's really the update of everything we're learning in Brussels about sustainability, and circularity is, of course, one of the topics on this website. So on this website, we come and we integrate, for instance, guidelines or a vademecum on circular construction that we just developed some months ago for the public building owners, and which is a guide, for instance, that really describes to public owners like what are the topics in renovation or new construction in which you can make circular decisions. It gives them concrete examples, but it also shows them ideas of how to include it in public circular procurement. So that's really a reference that we will update nowadays. It's something that has been online from April on, but of course we will keep on updating it and integrating it on our reference site. But let's not forget that we also need to be able to quantify actually the impacts and the benefits of circular construction. And that's why the totem tool that was developed...
Sorry, just to be sure, just maybe one more minute.
One more minute. Okay, I'll go just fast, but it's not too much left. The totem tool is just an important one because we need to quantify what is circularity and how we can have benefits with it. So it's not about just having qualitative guides, but we also need to quantify and help the actors, architects, to say, okay, this is the life cycle impact of different circular solutions and the benefits that we can make with them. And totem tool is something that is crucial for that. And since it's a national tool, it's also a really important one. Maybe on urban scale, we also have some other tools. I'll just skip that part. And just maybe to finish, is that we also really give guidance really to the professional offer and demand side, because they need to be ready to implement all these actions. So Build Circular and the Hub Brussels are two examples of, okay, companies can go to these websites, they can have a personal guidance in how to make their businesses more circular. And we see that the number is growing of enterprises coming there, networking in this new topic, and preparing themselves for what's coming in the next year. So that's really an important work we're doing and we're supporting, of course. Maybe just to make the link to the next presentations after, we're really aware that in Brussels, renovation is key. We have an existing stock that we need to renovate. And we cannot forget, of course, that besides this energetic story that we're dealing with today, we need to implement the action plans that we have been establishing for the circular economy. But Wiebe Verhoeven will present more about this later on. So to be continued in the next presentation, and we can discuss about this later.
Thank you very much, Anne. It was very interesting. You can hear that a lot of things are happening and a lot of good procedures and rules are being made. And now I am very pleased to give the floor to Sara Elberg. Oh, just a second, I have to get it all done. The role to give it a sec. There you go, Sara, so you can share your presentation. Sara Elberg is from the Danish Ministry of Environment, and she's an advisor there, also working on buildings and how to make them less wasteful. So now Sara will share a presentation. Just maybe make it voila, full screen. And Sara, the floor is yours.
Yes. All right. So you see the right presentation and you hear me? Yes. Good.
Perfect.
Yeah. I work in the Danish Ministry of Environment, and I just want to shortly tell you about construction and demolition waste in circular economy in Denmark. So the building and construction sector in Denmark has the largest potential to transition into circular economy, and the focus, like the environmental aspects of such a conversion, for us is mainly about avoiding problematic substances in the built environment that can harm people and the environment when we start the circular transactions of the materials, as well as optimizing the utilization of the resources we have in the built environment. So that's what we work with closely. And we think that can happen with a focus on quality in the built environment, flexibility and longevity, as well as making use of these reuse, recycle and bio-based materials that we are slowly seeing integrated into the construction sector. So if I can just get it to change. Oh. Might be a bit slow. So what we believe is that to do so, it requires a very strong collaboration, not only in the industry and the sector itself, but also in government. So we work closely with two of the other ministries in Denmark. I sit in the Ministry of Environment, but we also have a Ministry of Interior and Housing that has the regulation on building and building materials, has a huge strategy on sustainable buildings that's going to make CO2 requirements per square meter in all the new buildings in Denmark, and all sorts of very exciting things that we follow up on and help them with. And also we have a Ministry of Climate and Energy and Utilities that sits with energy efficiency and so on. And we work closely together, as I tried to illustrate with the arrows, like all these aspects that you would normally work within in Denmark to create a sustainable built environment. We all have like some part in it. So we mainly sit with the prevention and management of the waste sector. We try to help with the right material consumption in buildings. We try to make design of building and such, but we work closely together. And I think that's very important for us in Denmark, that we do not have the rights to one strategy. We all help each other to facilitate this process. And so we heard before that we have a lot of waste produced. In Denmark, we have 5 million tons of waste every year just from the construction sector. Might not seem as that much, but for a small country as Denmark, it's 40%, it's over 40% actually, of all the waste that we produce at a country. So that's massive amounts. And of course, we try to prevent the production of waste to start with, but we also see that renovation and demolition of building has a great potential for releasing materials to reuse and recycle, so that it can get into the circuit again. And that's where our regulation really has a strong side. I just brought a pie chart so you can see what kind of materials we have like a lot of fraction of. You can see that we have mixed waste. That's people that are not good at sorting, but we try to sort out a lot of waste. It's not always that the builders succeed, but we have a strong regulation on it. And just to tell you what actually happens with our waste, like when you sort it out, what happens in Denmark specifically. So the majority of the waste from the building and construction side is material utilized, which is considered to be a low value according to the waste hierarchy. For example, it's waste that is crushed and laid on the roads, where the material used for one last time as filling, rather than being reused or recycled into new products. We also have a small amount that is incinerated or going to landfill, but that's mostly if you find PCB or asbestos or something that you don't want to recycle again. We have very specific regulation on how to actually handle our waste from the building sector. We aim to increase the recycling rates. You can see that it's quite low. It's not very impressive, but we are really trying to make the regulation and to support a higher recycling rate. And I just bought the Circular Economy Action Plan for Denmark to pick out some examples to show you how we try to increase the recycling rate, but also reuse and prevention rates. So in July of 2021, so not that long ago, we published a national waste prevention and management plan. It's going to be like we tried to set out a long-term targets in it, but we're probably going to revise it because 2032 is it's a long way to it. So we might, change some of the targets if we get there faster. Hopefully, fingers crossed. The plan covers all aspects of circular economy. It's like covers plastics, bioresources, circular business models, eco-design. So it's a massive plan. We have 129 initiatives in it. We deep dive into some specific sectors, and building and construction is one of those sectors. I brought you guys 2 examples, one that we finished and one that we're still working on. So the first one is these initiatives that's on the screen, where we wanted to update our legislation because we want more traceability. So for Denmark, it's really important that if we start the circular economy, we don't reuse or recycle materials with a lot of harmful substances. The PCB scandal is still big in Denmark. We try to prevent everything to put that to happen. And we think it's very important to have the trust in the materials that we reuse or recycle, because if you have like 1 or 2 big scandals, people will then probably stop using them again. So we want to make it safe to recycle and reuse them. I'm not going to go into details with the initiatives because it's very specific, but it's an example of how we changed the legislation to support the circular economy. So what we did was we set out 4 steps that you as a builder, if you are to demolish or renovate a building, you have to go through these steps, and I compromised them here, so it's easier to read for you guys. But you have to start by doing this review of the building, finding out what kind of waste is there. Is there any dangerous waste that we need to take care of beforehand? And you would, go out and watch for yourself. Then before you can actually torn down the building, you have to notify the municipality so they can make sure that they have all the right chains for the waste to be handled, so that they can try and push recycle rates up. And you have to notify, does the building contains PCB and such? What type of waste do you have? How much of it? When will you, bring it to the municipality? Or which kind of company will, kind of handle it for you? Then you have to sort it in minimum of 10 fraction as a pie chart showed you before. And then you have to treat it in the highest possible way of the waste hierarchy. So that is black and white in the legislation in Denmark that you have to do this. Another one, my last example, is selective demolition. And that's where the building is demolished in a way that the material can be sorted out correctly and therefore used in the best possible way, while we also sort out the harmful substances. So it's a kind of more theoretic thing, but we set out that we want requirements on how everyone in the build sector is supposed to do this. And we want to introduce this to our legislation in 23. So that's almost, we're starting to prepare the legislation already. But in order to do such demand, you need a lot of knowledge. So a couple of years ago, we started gathering knowledge about selective demolitions across Europe and started integrated with the university. And we are not ready to publish the current results, but for you guys, I can tell you that the life cycle assessment that we made for a lot of different selective demolitions concluded that, as you might know, it's the best environmental impact in all the categories: CO2, water supply, everything was very positive. So it's good to know that it's the right way for at least Denmark to go. But we also did like an economic studies, whether it's going to be super expensive and where we can help as government. And introducing this will have consequences for both businesses, authorities, and such. We concluded that whether the socioeconomic gains as a whole exceeds the cost depends on the future demand and the sales opportunity of the reused and recycled materials. So if we can create a market for secondary resources, we will actually have the business case to do selective demolition in Denmark, and therefore the two systems really speak together, because we need them both to happen almost at the same time. So it's kind of like the egg and the chicken, kind of, are we going to implement the rules before we have a market, or should we, that's what we're trying to figure out, and we're going to talk a lot with the businesses and the sector in Denmark to figure out how to do that well. So that was the examples that I brought. I can just maybe finish off with saying that we also focus a lot in the plan to create a strong link between construction, product, chemical, and waste legislation in Denmark, so they kind of speak together instead of having like a lot of different legislation that one have to look up in. We also push for ambitious EU targets for recycling rates. We think that the current system of only, measuring material utilization is not really giving us that edge to be more ambitious as a member state. So we hope that is going to be one of the big focus. The internal market for secondary materials and resources is very important for us to make the business case to transition. And also we focus even more on how to prevent the circulation of harmful substances. So we keep creating legislation that sorts out or create specific demands. I think I think that was all I brought with you. Now we'll stay here all day, so you can just ask questions. The plan is, some of it is in English, but not all of it. So I think that's a big issue for member states. We don't translate everything we do, but you can always ask, and some of it is in English at this point.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this interesting presentation of what is also happening legislative in Denmark. So now we sort of have more of the overall legislation, what is trying to push the field. But of course, something is legislation, then another thing is how it's being implemented and how it's being done on a regional and municipal level. So this pushes us to the next session of our panel debate. And before just opening that, I want to welcome those of you who joined a bit later, or those who didn't hear it. Please write your questions in the chat. I think we already had a lot of good input. Remember to write them in the chat, and Tony and I will look at them as we go along. So please, this will give us the opportunity to use them in the panel debate. So without further ado, I would like to give now the word to, and I'm just changing the presentation skills, to Vibe Verhoeven, who is at the Cultural Heritage Directorate of Urban Brussels, and he will share a lot of information to us on the new Renovation transversal strategies for circular approach. I'll look through it and it looks very exciting. Please, Vibe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd like to make a link with what Sarah was telling us about different ministers. Here in Brussels, we launched the Alliance, the Renovation Alliance, which is an alliance of different public services and the private sector too. So I'm part of the operational cell of the Renovation. Just a little short story. 65% of greenhouse gases would come from building and construction. In Brussels, 33% of the rooftops are not insulated, and 40% of the buildings date from before 1945. And then on the lower side of the screen, you have the demands of Europe about reduction of greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide. So to achieve those, Belgium deposed the National Climate and Energy Plan at Europe, and Brussels translated their partly in the renovation strategy for Brussels capital regions. We got a lot of actions that have been determined in 5 big themes like finance, simplification, support or guidance, and regulation. The main goals are, like Anna Paduar already told us, to triple the number of renovations yearly, to have rationalize the use of energy in the buildings, and to have a better quality of the renovation. So that's why we created Renovation Alliance. Main goal for residential, Renovation is mainly for residential, and so to public living housing would be for 2040 and private to 2050 to reach an EPB certificate of sea level on the average, which is 100 kilowatt hour square meter a year. Therefore, I told you it's public and private. We got a lot of different profiles working together, and so a massive amount of institutions, which are public services, private. We got federations, we got social partners, we got educational institutions that are helping. The alliance is, the steering committee is the government, the Brussels government. In the strategic committee, we got social partners, we got some ministers like Pascal Smith, and we got the head of the administrations. And the operational cell is Urban Brussels, is Brussels Environment, and Constructive, which is the Construction Federation. Then so like Anne already showed us, we got 7 thematic work groups, and in the inner circle there are 4 transversal workshops. Those are all the actions, all the 34 actions done from the renovation strategy have been distributed over those thematic groups, and the works will start within the coming months to make it possible to have this renovation revolution coming in a few next years. And that's where the circular economy comes in. We've got a heavy collaboration already started. So in the preparing months, Anne Paduar and her team of circular economy mapped every possible solution of their 142 actions into every thematic group, and then from the thematic groups, they also identified their own questions and ideas of what they could or should have been done and how to collaborate. This is a bunch of ideas, just a selection of the 142, which I like. So it's different thing. Typically, it's making sure the procedures don't hurt each other. Like circular economy is how to say is stopped by the EPB requirements sometimes, and so that's an issue we have to solve. On the other hand, for example, the raise of the awareness at all different groups is what has to be fortified. Then more concrete, the Renolab is one of the actions that is also transversal and taking shape. It's on two big chapters. One is a little bit top down, Renolab ID. It's about finding solutions that can be applied on large scale. And then Renolab B of buildings is proposing good ideas, trying them out and see if they can be used for others. So Renolab ID is a call for project actually. It's open now, still for 10 days. And it has to be innovative, large scale potential, and we're going to test the technical and financial feasibility. Some examples what might be, it's very large, it's from the real building, maybe large scale, a whole neighborhood instead of one house after the other in its different contractors. But also, for example, alternatives of financing or digital tools that might help. So the call is open. You can find it on renolab.brussels. Renolab B buildings. That's about stimulating by doing, by demonstrating, and so checking out if regulation strategies and so on have to be adopted, and by showing it, by demonstrating, you can take the sector with you. And therefore, the main word is support. It's guidance, counseling, coaching, whatever. So we're going to test the circular and sustainable designs, and very important is the feedback that we can do and we can share. Therefore, the very strong guidance, but specifically here, there are 3 stages and 3 audiences that we design, that we aim. So design stage is the circular and sustainable design of the project that can be you can be guided for. Then we got the execution side, moment of phase where the owner, but also the contractor companies can find support and with us for these stuff. Important here is that the Renolab will be inspired by the Be Circular, like Anne already told, and the GRO. The participation by the Brussels bouwmeester en maître architect and his team is very important for us, and with a lot of criteria to do. So this is the transversal approach and that we are having.
Thank you, Wiebe, for the Brussels vision perspectives. Let's go to Denmark and see what is happening for the island of Bornholm and the vision they have to be waste-free by 2032 and how buildings can contribute to this. So I give the floor. I think it's a double presentation. First Jesper and then Rocio. So I think Jesper, the floor is yours. I think we have issues for the presentation. It's still not visible.
Yeah, I have problems with the sound. Now I'm on the sound, and now I have to share my presentation, but
Yes.
the share button is locked.
Okay.
It's back again.
Okay.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Now I'm ready. Sorry for the
Yes.
problems.
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. Welcome. My name is Jesper Justussen, and I'm head of the Environment and Project Department at BOVA. And if you were told that BOVA is a small island in the Baltic Sea, and BOVA is the local waste treatment company under the regional municipality. I will in the next 4 slides talk briefly about BOVA's vision and about BOVA's work with waste in the construction and demolition industry. And I have 4 slides. And after that, Rocio Jensen will talk about the circular economy in the construction and demolition industry at Bornholm. BOVA has named our vision Bornholm showing the way without waste in 32. It means that in 32, all waste at Bornholm is treated as a resource. BOVA has therefore planned the shutdown of the incineration plant in 32. And we now need to find new ways. We need a lot of good ideas, and we need also committed partners. As you can see here, it's some pictures of BOVA's facilities. BOVA has 42 employees. 10 of them is in my department. We have an incineration plant with a capacity of 20,000 tons. We have a sanitary landfill with a lift of 40,000 tons. We have a waste processing center with a cardboard and paper sorting plant. We have 6 container sites / recycling centers and 14 small waste collection stations as seen here in the middle. The total waste amount in 20 was 80,000 tons, and we recycled 68% and incinerated 25%, and 7% was on landfills. On this slide, you can see an illustration of all roadmap towards 32. It's just an example. It's not the actual way, but it was thought out in 19. So we maybe will come up with a new edition later. But it means we have divided it in 3 periods. One period where we are family and with the current requirements and efforts, and a period where we have the expectations of regulatory requirements and technologies, and the last period where we don't know the regulation requirements and we don't know the technology developments. You can see that we have the construction waste, and that's actually to start here in 22. So that was correct. The last slide is I will quickly mention what activities is relevant to this topic. We have started a partnership program we call Zero Waste Bornholm, and we have a website called zerowastebornholm.com, and you're welcome to look. And we're actually now looking for partners for the construction industry, or maybe chains of builders, merchants. We are also planning to build an experimentarium and house for circularity build of recycled materials, and that will be a future experience center for circular energy. We right now have collected 200,000 euros, and we need about 2 million. We also apply for Horizon projects, and right now we are in the middle of a project called Safe Cycling, and in 2022 we are looking for partners for another Horizon Cluster 6 program about integrated solution for circularity in buildings and construction sector. We also have regular meetings with contractors at Bornholm. We have an association called Danish Industry for Builders. We meet on maybe a quarterly basis, and we have daily meetings with our local authorities and maybe monthly visits from the EPA and the national authorities. So that was all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jesper, for giving us the overview and what you were working on with Bornholm. And right now I'm presenting or sharing the presenter role to you, Rocio, so you can maybe go a bit deeper into some of the projects that you are also doing at Bornholm. Yes, and it's coming.
Yes.
Rocio, I see it.
Yeah. How it look like now? There.
I think in a second it will be perfect. Yeah, perfect. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, my name is Rocio Jensen, and I'm working at the development department of the municipality of Bornholm in Denmark. Today I would like to tell you how the municipality and BOVA work together about working with circular economy in construction, and how we are going to work forward with this issue in the coming years. One of the special values of our island is the traditional architecture of our small villages. At the same time, there is a tendency to move to the villages and leave the houses for the countryside empty. And we need to preserve the historical heritage of the island, and that's why we need to do better when we remove old buildings from our landscape. I'm sorry, I forgot to say something. These ruins are actually the key to preserve our architectural legacy. So when we demolish, we must do it selectively, so we can both save material resources and preserve history at the same time. So we use old, good quality materials from demolitions, from ruins, of the demolition of ruins, to preserve old, well-maintained buildings. To be an island, it's a challenge itself, but it's also an opportunity to develop local scalable solutions. Bornholm has a rich infrastructure that makes possible to work with the whole value chain around building materials, from demolition to reuse. And that gives us a unique opportunity to work with scalable solutions in this area. We have been working with circularity in construction in the last 3 years. There is some noise, I think. I don't know where it's coming from. In these 3 years, we have been able to make small modifications in the value chain in a circular direction. Is that me or something about the noise, the sound? Sorry, no, it's okay. Yeah. We did that focusing in the value chain as a whole, making changes on local policies and calling companies to action. As an example, one of the things we did was that we have these grants, demolition grants for private properties, and we try to look at it and how we can make these policies to work different, so we can help the circular transition to the value chain. And then we focus in a selective demolition and resource mapping of 3 representative demolition cases. We collected data about these cases, and not only about the process, but also detailed data about the materials. We chose 6 different kind of materials where we concentrate, and in this way we map all this data to obtain key figures about quantities, economics, and environmental. We also look about how is our building stock doing in the island, and out of all of our empty houses, how many of them are they really ready for demolition? They couldn't be rescued to be used again, and it actually we came to the result that it's 42% of the empty houses on the island that are ready for demolition. And if we say that we take 1/3 part of them each year, then we will have an economical potential of 1.3 million Danish crown a year by selling these materials, only these materials, these extractions we chose in the next years. And this is with prices from today, market prices for today. We also make some projections. We try to look at how it will look like in the next 10 years. We look at the material streams from constructions and demolitions. I mean, that's been from demand and supply perspective. And we this is one of the modeling we did. It's just simple modeling that shows with a small increase now in the bottom, you can see that with a small increase of public procurement changes, then we could reach a balance between supply and demands of recycled materials in a much better way than if the public doesn't help. So that's a big eye open to our politicians the municipality also need to help in this matter, to our island can be circular in the future. Through these cases of demolition projects, of course, it was real cases in the real life. So there was real materials coming out to circulate. And that's one example of about the bricks. It was the bigger portion of materials, it was the bricks. And in May 2020, a new local company selling recycled bricks was born on Bornholm. Our project offered a startup delivery of 40 tons of recycled bricks to this company and facilitate a long-term delivery from BOVA. What we're doing next in the next couple of years, we have been together with Copenhagen and Hvidovre municipality, applying to EU programs to make this project become real. We call it the material, the pitch. We are very excited about it. Project it aims to increase the recycling of building materials and components by developing an integrated tool and system to easily identify and disseminate the valuable materials from one building to another one. So that's basically the three elements in the project. The one is the tool to map and describe the key data on valuable materials from the renovation to demolition. And number two, it's the digital platform as an interface that relays the identified data directly from the screening tool to an existing material bank. And third, the physical storage itself, where materials will be waiting to find the use in the new building project. So that's our work in the next couple of years. Tool will be supported and implemented by existing I cannot say that word, existing, yeah, circular construction networks as our own, call it Green Building Network on Bornholm, where we can address this tool to medium-sized craftsmen and contractors that can help us to make it friendly to these small scale companies we have on the island. We think in Bornholm that improving documentation of second-hand materials, it will make a difference. So project like, for example, the one just Juste told us about, the Skralderiet, it can become possible. This is a picture of it, and we hope someday we can make it true. So yeah, coming soon on Bornholm. Thank you. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Rocio and Jesper, for sharing very interesting many projects and ideas and approaches you have and some real life experiences. And with that, I'm very pleased to go to the next level of our debate, so where we actually look to the real practices, the people doing it, actually using all the experiences that we already have out there and trying to scale it up. So the focus of this next one is new practices, and I'm really pleased to start by giving the floor to Kasper Østergaard Christensen, who is the head of circular building practices at 3XN and GXN, and he will share with us a project they have called the resource block or resource area. Yeah. And Kasper, I'll just give the presentation role to you. Here you go. And remember the questions in the chat. Soon it's coming up. Please, Kasper, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everybody, and thanks for the first part. It's super interesting to hear so many great initiatives around the EU. So yeah, I've been asked to tell a bit about our project, the resource block, and in general about putting circular building into practice. So I just want to give a little background. A couple of years ago, we did this book.
Kasper, just to make sure, are you sharing?
I am.
I don't think for all of us.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up.
Well, now it's coming. Just have to. We didn't see anything.
I think it was on my.
Voila. Now it's perfect.
Voila. All right. This was the front page, and now we're here. So we did this book called Building a Circular Future. 5 years ago now, which sort of laid out our theoretical approach to how we want to build circular. And it focused around design by disassembly and material passport, like we want to document the materials that we put into our building, and then circular economy, which is about the new economy behind building circular. So that's kind of where we come from when we talk about building circular. And after getting got a lot of good feedback on the book, we sort of thought that the next step is to get something built, because that is by far the best example. Everybody can go out and see that we can actually do this. It's not just talk. So we took initiative to the Circle House project, and we put the overall goal here. It's 60 housing units built for a social housing company. So it's very cheap housing. And the goal is that 90% of all the building materials that we put into the buildings, we should be able to take them out again and reuse them at a high value. That means, like, we want to use it, the building components one-to-one, for example, the concrete elements one-to-one, and not crushing down into aggregates for new concrete elements, because there's a huge loss of resources in that. And so far, in the highlight of the Circular project, it's not finished yet, is the demonstrator, which is we had a virtual tour of it last week with Helle as well, which is like a one-to-one mock-up of the building system, but also like just an experimentarium of different circular materials, where the industry can come out and discover and experience these circular solutions. So that's kind of been a highlight so far there. Okay, so to the resource block, and yeah, where the Circle House focused a lot on the building mass that we're going to build in the future. The resource block is looking back on the building mass that we already built, that we also need to deal with, because we are tearing buildings down and adapting our building mass. So the Danish government has published this goal that we want. It's called Denmark Without Parallel Society. So basically, they don't want any ghettos in Denmark, and the way it affects our building mass is that they have this timeline of, like, they have a certain set of criteria for areas, and if you fall into this category, you're categorized as a ghetto, and if you stay on the list for more than 4 years, you're categorized as a hard ghetto, and then you suddenly have to transform if you don't transform within those 4 years. And basically that means that the building mass is going to be transformed, so it's only 40% that is left of this these blocks, and the rest is transformed into less dense and more larger structured and more diverse building mass. But basically, when we are doing this exercise in terms of doing something good socially, there's a lot of resources getting lost in tearing down 60% of our of these building masses. And as Sarah just told us, it's a lot of building waste we get out of this. And what's the number, like 40% of all waste in Denmark is this pile over here. So basically, in the resource block, as the name hints at, we want to look at it as a block of resources and not just waste. So we want to take these building blocks and transform them into the new construction that is going to be put up instead of the old building blocks. So yeah, we want to go from this rubble into actually like dismounting the building elements into something we can actually use. And here's an example from the Netherlands by Superlocal. So basically, we went out and took a look at the 15 toughest ghettos in Denmark and kind of analyzed the building system behind it. So yeah, here they are. And basically, we found out that they are made from more or less the same materials, all of them. They are built from concrete elements, and we do a lot of that in Denmark, and we're especially good at it back in the 60s and 70s. And here the difficult thing is that it's not made to be disassembled again. Everything is reinforced and just casted together, so it's just one big coherent mass that you can disassemble, like we have done in the circuit house, which is also made in concrete. This is a bit blurry, but then we analyzed the entire structure, divided all the building materials up into different piles, not physically, but on an analytical level, and then mapped out the amounts of material we have. So everything from the concrete to the interior walls, facades, glass, stairs, steel, and elevators. Just mapped it all out, laid it all out, and saw how much it was. And then when we had these building blocks and these building materials, we could also do an LCA, a life cycle analysis, and just a resource impact mapping of the materials inside the building. And basically, it's pretty easy to when you have the figures. So we mapped out, and this is the stack to the left. It's this is how much CO2 it would take to rebuild the structure as it is now, or would have taken day one when it was built. And then basically, if we could build a new building out of the building materials that we took down, it would amount to the CO2 on the left stack over here. So basically, it's from 3,200 tons, and it would only take 100 tons to reuse this into a new structure. So basically, we would save 3,000 tons of CO2 if we are able to take down this concrete structure and then rebuild it into a new structure. So basically, the way we look at the approach is we have the current state of the buildings. We will strip it for all the windows and roof structure and all that, so we have the bare concrete structure, and we will dismantle it into here an example in like cutting out say a building volume, a building space that can then be reused one-to-one. But it could also be to cut out the slabs, for example, or the walls. The slabs are also super easy to reuse. And then the next part is like, what can we then use these building elements for? So we've been through this design exercise, combining it together with wood materials, and adding new facades. Again, all like when we're doing it for the design for disassembly principles. For example, adding a prefab facade module, having a facade system that is designed for disassembly. The new structure we're adding would be lightweight CLT wood, bolted on the concrete slabs using bolts, and again connecting the elements from new using DFD. And then this is just one sketch that we've done. So basically, this is an application of both building elements, but also just the slabs cut out and just rebuilt into a new structure. As you might see, you can see the traces of the previous house up here in the slabs, but also you would have some patina from the previous use, and you can cut out doors. But also like this, you would now add wood, so you have this great contrast between something new, which is light, and something old that is heavy. And all in relation to the design for disassembly principles, like having all the electricity put outside the wall, so it's easy to remove again. And then basically the aim is to create a whole new, say more or less village type structure out of these old building elements, and that can then be combined with the old building blocks to create a whole new type of way to live together. So for the blocks, but now also a more dense row house that could attract other type of people. Yeah, that was a super short fly through of that.
Thank you, Kasper. While you uncheck and leave the conversation, thank you very much for sharing.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing this experience. Let's go to Brussels example. The office has called it metropolitan hybrids because it is a transformation ongoing of the former WTC towers in Brussels. It will be presented by Olivier, program agent at the Architecture Office 51 and 4E. Olivier, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I just had to unmute to be able to present.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'll try to limit it to 10 minutes, but it's quite tough for such a project to explain in its wide ambitions, and I think it's the only way to show it, because how we as architects interpret the way to circular building practice is in its vast wideness of what it should do, and therefore I really am pleased with the title of the seminar being like, how can circularity generate more livable cities? And I think that's the real purpose of it. So I will very quickly go through the process that we went through, just to show you also like what our evolution was in our own understanding of what circularity means, because we ourselves had to be schooled in this way of thinking, let's say. So when we started the project in 2017, it was very new to us also, and so we discovered along the way a lot of new ways of looking into architecture and actually realizing a project. So just to situate ourselves, the project concerns 2 towers out of 8 towers which you see here, which were located north to Brussels, and which back in the days were meant to be the center of a business district, which would be the crossroads of a highway going from Amsterdam to Paris, and one going from the seaside and London, let's say, to Berlin. So these are the 2 highways you see here. And so this was the ideal scenario that that was installed back then. And this is the actual project that we're talking about, which was actually built also, but where you see it in an environment which was idealized, where you see cars driving on one level, and where the pedestrians would circulate on the level 3, let's say, so to separate the fluxes. But something that was actually never built. It was a kind of megalomanistic approach to overhaul the city as it was back at that time. And this actually was never installed, but which was the vision with which the project was built. So here you see the situation in the late 70s of Brussels, with the city center below. And then the project which it concerns here all the way on the top to the north of the city center. And you see that a lot of the area around it was actually completely torn down to install this new master plan. But you immediately see that this kind of big vision stopped short, quite sudden, when you encounter different realities of small scale housing and other infrastructure. So this mismatch resulted in a trauma, let's say, for Brussels. For a lot of people who were residents in that area, who had to be expropriated and move elsewhere, or move to other buildings which were built in the same block. But so this was reality for quite a long time. So this is the first project that was realized of that big Manhattan plan, as it was called, with all the empty plots being around it. The neighborhood didn't like it. And so nowadays we find ourselves still in a situation where there's a lot of friction and confusion. And so what the first thing we did was to install ourselves in the building together with other people to actually, from within the project that we would do for these towers, think about it in a plural way and to actually open up the building to a different type of user than what it was meant for. So here you see a university occupying a floor where students thought about all different types of projects in the neighborhood. There was an exhibition organized, so the public could all of a sudden access this building, which normally they couldn't because it was an office building. So people started encountering the qualities of the building also, like the panorama that you have here on this floor. And we ourselves as architects also installed ourselves in the building. And we made an atelier with all the stakeholders thinking about what the future of the site should become and living the building as such. And so here you see a mock-up that we made in one of the empty floors of the towers, which was thinking about a potential renovation of the building into housing units. So you see kind of covering of the structural floor slabs as they were, with gypsum board panels made to measure to have the most ceiling height. So this was all done on site and was actually part of the process. So we didn't think of the building as something abstract and from our own office, but it was really on site that we saw what made sense and what not. So in terms of circularity, we really treated the building as a bank of materials, let's say. So the two towers, and they were called WTC 1 and 2. We started scanning them, so the whole building was inventorized. And so with that, we really were able to check which materials could have which new purpose in the future. And so here you see a summary of the result after that whole exercise, where you have 62% actually being reused on site. So nothing had to be done with these materials. So it's largely coming from the keeping of the structure and the underground. Then reuse elsewhere. What we recycle, so this is another big chunk, 31% goes into recycling of concrete, glass, aluminium, steel, and then 5 to 6% is actually waste because it's contaminated or no longer healthy. And so this is the result of a lot of materials being demounted and stored in the building temporarily, to then move elsewhere. So you see a lot of rock wool, a lot of interior panels, which was a huge work for the, let's say, demolition contractor who was not used to this kind of treatment of materials, and certainly not on such a scale, because we're talking about a lot of quantity of materials. Here's another example of terrace tiles, and this one is, I will elaborate a bit on this example. So this is the roof terrace, which you saw where in the old master plan, the pedestrian should have walked, but which never came into being. And so the roof terrace actually was never properly used. So the tiles we recuperated were all stacked on wooden pallets to be able to bring it elsewhere. They were then, or they are at the moment speaking, they are stocked near the canal in Brussels, which is only 1 kilometer further up the site. And so it's a huge amount of tiles. And so there they are now being treated to clean them and to actually make them usable again. But when you see the result, it's actually it's a new tile, while this tile is at this moment almost 50 years old. So the quality is not less than a new material. It's only demanding effort in both demounting, treating, and bringing it back into a second life. Another example were facade cover panels, which were across the whole length of the facades in the offices present. Same process. And we thought of a way how to reuse them in the new project. So we started testing it. We started making mock-ups. So this is a mock-up where the bent panel was actually mounted on new support. This new support, we try to make it out of very cheap and low impact material, as you see here. And this was then the result of the mock-up, with which we proved that actually this material could be reused. In the end, this didn't happen because of cost, because of risks, because of a lot of maintenance procedures needing these panels to go through. And so in the end, these were used not inside the project or the new project that we were making, but actually elsewhere into new furniture that is now living in the living rooms in Brussels. I think a third important step we made in the project on this scale is the reuse of concrete coming from the two towers and actually being reused in the new project, which I will show later, through really separating the concrete first and breaking it up in large pieces. Then going to a treatment site. It's also near Brussels, so it's not. It doesn't take a lot of transport, where it's being crushed and sorted into different sizes, and then of course tested to what quality of concrete it can become again in a new application. And so recently, a few months ago, the first concrete with these reused aggregates of the old concrete was poured again on site, as you see here. So where the circle was made, let's say. And this is a very big step, certainly on such a scale, on such a project, which is huge. This is very new practice, let's say, in Brussels. So with this in mind, coming to the project, just to show you a bit what the project is about. On the left, you see the two towers, two standard office towers with one big socle, which was completely closed. Again, because of this master plan where actually there would only be cars driving around the socle and the pedestrians would be higher up. So this socle didn't have any active facade. What we installed as project was based on the nature of this building, with its 5 floors underground and 2 circulation cores of the actual towers, and to rebuild a new project around it. This you see here. You see in black the 2 towers, and then in red the new project that we actually gave shape around it, with which we connected the 2 towers to each other, and thus actually making a lot more use possible. So not only limited to these standard offices as they were constructed back then, but actually delivering environments that had double height spaces with a new volume in between the towers, but also residential and hotel program, to actually break up the building from a monofunctional one into a multifunctional one. And so here you see a scheme of the program division, which is also quite specific, and which I think is the things we have to be prepared for when we think circular, is that solutions will not be standard anymore, but we have to really tweak them according to the let's say the base we find on site. So what you see here is the 2 towers as they were. We kind of remake them in the same way, around 2 cores, and we have the new volume which put in the middle. In the new volume, this is fully office program, or let's say public program, a new program, and these floors are double high. These floors connect only to 1 out of 2 floors in the towers. And so what you see is that we continue these floors into the towers each time. And on the floors where the double high volume doesn't have a floor or doesn't have a connection, we put a residential and hotel program. And in that sense, this is a scheme we install now, but we also make it flexible in time, so that we can actually, when the offices are reduced, we can put more housing and hotel, as you see in the left in the towers. More floors can be occupied, and so the floors that we now continue from the double height volume in the middle into the towers, they are actually cut, and this can perfectly work. So they make use of the circulation course in the towers still, but it could also become more office. And so the building is really designed future-proof, and this is something which we didn't have before. So the two towers as they were totally incapable of having new uses. They weren't up to the norms anymore. So with updating the building, still keeping 60% of the mass on site, we make sure that this building can actually evolve during time for the coming 50 or 100 years, let's say. So this is a floor plan of the offices where you see the two circulation cores with the new volume in the middle, which is a fully open space which connects the two towers. Then the floors in between with the apartments and hotel rooms. And this is the architecture that it delivers then, which is also a hybrid architecture, and which I think is really the key of thinking circular, is that this architecture is not expressing a program, let's say, because the towers have one architecture behind which both residential, hotel, offices or other uses could take place, but which is more an urban architecture, which can over time take these evolutions and doesn't really, it's not restricting itself in terms of what it could become in the future. And the last part which I want to share with you is, of course, which was one of the main drivers of this project, is that this inactive socle of the building needed to be really opened up and become a location in the city, because at this moment, how it was today, this was really a dead spot in the city. And so we really opened up the socle. So the socle is completely different. And we multiplied the addresses. So there is a large greenhouse, there are little shops, there is a sports center, there is the apartment lobby, there is a fitness, there is a hotel lobby, there is a large bicycle stand. And so all these different functions have their own entrance, so that they can also operate completely independently. And there is no interdependence of these functions, which is also crucial to be able that the building can evolve and actually have all the functions have their own comfort and needs, let's say. And so this is something to end with. It's an activity that was done in 2018 when we were with our office in the building. It was by Pooley School, which is an organization striving for more open air swimming in Brussels. Where you see that actually the urban space around the project is totally inadapted to what people actually need or want. And I think with the project, which you see here in the background with the same activity, the giving functions that actually could host complementary activities. So with this greenhouse that we construct, which is completely public and where people can go in and do this type of events, and where people can have a drink or meet. I think this is also crucial, and this is the actual goal of making projects. It's not the goal of putting materials together, but it's actually making something interesting with it, and something which gives purpose to the space we inhabit daily. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Olivier. We have two questions, and I didn't answer you, Helle. I think we, in the questions and answers, there is a question specific about this, the obstacle maybe for circular economy being the fact that dumping waste is far too cheap. Okay, maybe if Koen Peters, who formulated this, want to add something, he can take the floor. But I think, and that's a question probably for the practitioners who have given concrete examples, that probably circular economy is maybe about not making everything dumping waste. And then it is probably related to another question, the financial evaluation. and the logistics. So probably some of the demolished buildings can be you have to get rid of as a dumping waste, but how can you reduce this, and how do you deal with the costs and winning money? Because do you compare the reused materials to what is the market today? How do you make a financial evaluation? And how do you handle with these logistics, as we saw in the last example near the canal or whatever? I think it applies to the island of Bornholm, the project for the resource blocken, and maybe the WTC towers in Brussels. So maybe someone can react to this.
Please also, sorry, Tori, just for jumping in, please, panelists, you're welcome to put on your camera. So, because now there's no more presentations, we can actually see you. So it'll be very nice. And yeah, I don't know if, Rocio, maybe you want to comment first? Or...
Yes. So
I give a comment here, Kasper from GXM. I think one way to get away from looking at it as waste is starting to look at it as a resource, like just seeing it in a positive way. One example that we have like really broke my mind is like if you take the concrete element that we just saw, if you crush that down and sell that, which is still reused, just sell that as a road fill, like fill on our roads. That costs per ton equals to 30 kroner, which is like €4 or something. But if you can resell a concrete element, a new price of that is around 4,000 euro. Yeah, 4,000 euro. Yeah. Yeah. So if you just sell that at half price to say that like 2,000 euro, like you have a huge amount of value that you can get. So we really want to put the focus on the value that you can get out of reusing your resources instead of just treating it as waste. So I think that's a better spin to put at it than just look at it as waste, and how do we avoid it.
Okay, thank you. And Rocio, do you want to add?
Yes, I'm sorry, my microphone was mute before. I didn't realize that. Yes, in our cases in the project we work in Bornholm, we find out that demolition cost by working selectively, it was about 20% more than the original demolition cost. That's what our conclusion in the cases. And of course, some of the fractions are more valuable than other ones in market right now. And of course, some of the fractions are more expensive to taken out in a selectively way than others. But if we analyze the supply and the demand, and in that way, we find out that actually some of our materials were a very good business case if and I put this and with an accent on it, that if the demands are in place. So if somebody is requiring, then it will be a good business case. Some of the materials right now, but it's a lot of issues today about this, and we hope one of the biggest issues is to take this demand to rule over the society, and that's what we are trying, this small society like Bornholm, to make happen. Yes.
Maybe Olivier, because you showed that for the heating installations, you thought about reusing it, and then finally it is reselling it. I think it's a collaboration with the company Rotor in Brussels. So the vision is shifting, and it's testing and see what is best option. And you
yes, it's I think it will have a lot of possible answers, and at least what we discovered in the project is that you need to always take into account your specific parameters that you work with. So in our case, For example, what was decisive is that there was a company who came and extracted materials out of the towers, which were still with a lot of value, but which we didn't plan to recuperate in the project. So this was Rotter, which Tony was mentioning, and it's actually a company that has a huge warehouse and where they stock materials coming from all sides, all different buildings in Brussels, reselling it to just normal people who want to use it in their buildings or professionals. What was quite peculiar is that they already they demounted these panels which were on the radiators of the building. So they had already done the procedure. They transported it. They took it in stock, and so they also expect a revenue from it. So they were selling it at that point from their stock. After which only we started thinking, but hey, we could actually reuse it in our building, so why don't we reuse it? But actually at that point the materials already had a value for the person who took it, so we had to actually rebuy our own material. So this was like it's so, yeah, it's so difficult to get a grip on indeed the budgetary impact of it, because I think we're in this phase where it's not really clear for us how to do this well. I think we need to really set up a few guidelines and official ways of dealing with this. What is the value of a material coming out of a building, and how to look at it in a proper way. But now it's just case per case almost.
Yes, and can you take in account the cost and win for local companies and transport and so on? It's like maybe not the price of a product, but like how important it might be to be involved with more local companies and to keep it local and to have short distances. So does that have an impact on this policy, or is there any experience with that? Yes, Rocio.
We are very interesting when we are an island. Logically, we want to keep things in our own boundaries, because if not, we get a lot of CO2 and transport costs and everything. So of course, we need to do it so locally as possible. And that's why we are trying now in this coming 2 years to keep stakeholders together to find out a way to make a local market, a building material market where people can go and have access to these materials. But we need the private sector to be active to do this. We need the private companies, small companies working in the construction area to be active, to use these materials, and the owners, the buildings owners, also both public and private, to get active to promote the demand and supply of these materials in a central place, so the island can apply and own demands. But of course, it would never go up. It will never go up. So some kind of exteriorizing, some kind of transport, it would be unnecessary, because not all the construction materials can be expected to use in a small society. We need to interact with the rest of Denmark. But our ambition is to do it so local as possible without closing our eyes. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Olivier.
Yeah, I think that's interesting what you say, because this is also a lesson we learned, is that it's much more valuable to actually take out materials from one site and actually reuse it as fast as possible somewhere else, instead of reusing it on your own site or trying to per se keep it there for the sake of the story or for the sake of not having transport. But if you do it locally, if you define the region as a place from between which the materials can flow, I think that makes a lot more sense, because speaking from the experience of the WTC towers, it's it's just way more costly today to stock such a quantity of materials for a period of more than 2 years, because the point of deconstruction, where we take out, for example, these tiles of the terrace and we can remount them, it's more than 2 years. And so the period we need to stock this huge quantity is actually costing so much, which is not in relation to the actual cost of the material or the cost of putting new material. So I think it makes much more sense to set up a network of where these materials can be exchanged, and that at the point where something becomes available, it can as soon as possible be reused elsewhere.
Yes, because you have a question that is related to this, I think, and it was specific for Casper about the logistics. Is it also about like the stock and keeping it somewhere? And so maybe if you want, you can formulate your question.
Yeah, my question was to Casper, because it's a concrete project, but on a large scale, and you did an evaluation of the environmental impacts, and it was an open question, informative, if you managed to also look at the financial impacts and the logistics, because if you speak about interventions on that scale, I guess logistics become really important to see how you can demount on one side, and if it's all demountable and you can stock it while reconstructing on the other side new housing. So that was a question in the chat that I put some time ago, but we're kind of discussing it already.
Yeah, so just to put a few words on it, like in this specific case, I showed the concrete elements actually staying on site because they're just like being remodeled into new housing on site. But of course, logistics is a big issue and question mark in all this, especially when they're transporting concrete, because you can quickly lose all the CO2 you're saving. You can use that to transporting concrete around in the country. So basically, how I see it is that there should be it should be used quite locally. We shouldn't transport it too far. So yeah, the best case would be when you know that a building is being torn down or dismantled, that you can put the knowledge out about it to the industry nearby, so they can you can say bid on it or like adapt their designs to it, so they can take it to avoid transporting the elements too much. And then I also think that there's that we should try to avoid storing too many materials. Like we should quickly find a new home for them, because I see that there could be like, we have kind of what you call it material graveyards. Like if you just like store materials on a site and we just let it be there for a while, we just end up having piles of not used building materials lying around. So really see like this matchmaking of buildings already being taken down, like putting out these materials online on the market before the building is taken down, so they know where they're going when the building is being taken down, so we don't have to store it and also not have to transport it too far.
Thank you very much, Casper, for giving your input to that. Cohen Peters, you have a question. Could you take the floor, please? It's very shortly. I don't know if it's possible for you otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, but I think it's not so easy to answer this question because it's about a company that is not present, and I'm not sure exactly how it works with subsidies or not, or its European projects and so on. So indeed, it is maybe a reflection for all the public services involved, how, when they work with private sector, how can they be organized in a sort of economic reality? So that's maybe a reflection that maybe a lot of it is now more experimental and so on. But I think if I saw like Reno Lab and so on, it is with private sector and so on, and they might have reflections on how to evolve the situation to make it doable and feasible for them as well. So I consider this as a reflection, but we cannot give the floor to Rotor, who is not invited. There were maybe one of the options if we would have more time and invite much more speakers, and maybe next time. Okay.
Maybe it's getting time, Tony.
Yes, I think so. 2 hours is quite long, so it's good to wrap up. And I want to thank everybody, for the speakers and so on, for their contributions to this first platform between Denmark and Brussels, to be continued. So we consider this as a trial and to see what focus might be for future exchanges. And so we thank the the Danish representation and the Danish Embassy to have contacted us at first for this exchange. And I think all are eager to share more experiences and maybe more specifically on some topics we can see. And now we had a very broad approach, I think. So we can see future exchanges of experience possible.
Yes, and we also, from the Danish Embassy, would very much like to thank you, Urban Brussels and the Brussels region, for the collaboration, and very much for all the panelists and the great experiences you're sharing with us, and all the people listening out there. I know many of you also have a lot of good experiences. I think today it definitely showed that, I don't know if we're on the same page, but we're definitely trying to find out many of the same challenges, and there is a lot. On the other hand, we also saw many numbers that there is a lot of opportunity that we need to dig into. I heard different words. It sounded like building mismatching with the storage, material storage, but no graveyards, please. And then it also seems that there's a lot of political focus, a lot of legislation being made also to draw it in this direction. So I definitely think it would be very nice for some of us to meet in the future, maybe as Pascal Smith said in the beginning, in real life. It definitely brings a different dimension to the exchange. Thank you so much for today. We will share the recordings and the presentations afterwards to those who participated, and I wish you all a nice afternoon.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Just wait.
Okay.